We have a reaction coming in from the Supreme Court. Vishnu Shankar Jain, who is one of the key petitioners in opposition of these new guidelines that were in fact put out by the UGC, he has reacted to this decision by the Supreme Court. Let's take a look.
सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने जो यूजीसी रेगुलेशंस नए नियम पास किए गए हैं उस पर सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने रोक लगाई है, उसको एबियंस में रखा है और सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने अपनी पावर्स को एक्सरसाइज करते हुए अंडर आर्टिकल 142 जो यूजीसी रेगुलेशंस 2012 हैं उनको इन ऑपरेशन किया, उनको प्रभावी किया।
अगला कदम क्या रहेगा, क्योंकि इस पे सुप्रीम कोर्ट की तरफ
अब सुप्रीम कोर्ट केंद्र सरकार को और सारे पक्षकारों को नोटिस जारी किया है और इस मामले की अगली सुनवाई 19 मार्च को निर्धारित की गई।
19 मार्च को क्या कुछ होने की संभावनाएं हैं? अब
ये तो कोई व्यक्ति प्रेडिक्ट नहीं कर सकता है। केंद्र सरकार से जवाब मांगा है, केंद्र सरकार अपना जवाब देगी, फिर मामला आगे बढ़ेगा।
And Ananya continues to be with us on the broadcast. Ananya, the next date of hearing, 19th March. We were just listening to Vishnu Shankar Jain, one of the key petitioners against these new regulations that were put out by the UGC.
Well, absolutely. In fact, Vishnu is somebody, whose petition actually talks about how these UGC guidelines, the new diktat was actually could be misused. It is completely discriminatory to the general category students, and that is exactly what the Supreme Court also felt, that it is a vague direction that is coming from, in fact, the UGC. It is a directive that needs to be stayed at this particular point of time. It's worded poorly, and that's exactly why these guidelines have been put into an abeyance, and the 2012 guidelines would actually continue as far as things are concerned, is what in fact the Supreme Court has so far gone on to say. The new guidelines are have been put into an abeyance, but at this particular point of time it would be very, very crucial to see, Griha, as to how would the central government be responding as far as these guidelines are concerned, because it is the direction of the diktat of the UGC, the promotion of equity guidelines 2026, and now that they have been put into abeyance, whether the central government would concede that it was a vague direction, whether the central government would suggest that we can actually redraft the same, or we can actually come in with a proper version of the same, providing equity to all, is something that would be interesting to see, because guideline which is named as a regulation of equity guidelines, if that is not providing equity to every class of person, then completely the Supreme Court is very, very clear that it's a vague direction. The Supreme Court very categorically, and it's the Chief Justice of India, Justice Suryakant himself, going on to say, do we want to make ourselves like the USA, where white kids actually go to school? Not only that, he also goes on to say that we are into 75 years of independence, where we dream of a casteless society, but these kind of regulations, would they not put us into a regressive state itself?
Right. The arguments that so far have come before the Apex Court, before this decision of keeping these fresh guidelines in abeyance really came about, Ananya. What were the key arguments, and what was the key concern about these fresh guidelines? We do know how the false complaint clause that could have been punishable, that was completely done away with as far as these new guidelines are concerned, and also the addition of OBCs into this entire purview. That was also one of the key areas of grouse. More on that as well.
Well, absolutely. There were, allegations, and there were arguments that were raised by various petitioners that, this is a guideline that could be easily be misused, because the general category student would never have a grievance mechanism for him, and that's exactly why, it makes it very, very difficult for him. Now, since the OBC would also be included, there would be a lot of problems that could actually arrive. But, unusually, Griha, this was a very, very short hearing that took place, wherein less of arguments and more of observations came in from the topmost of the country, because the Supreme Court, it seems, because every judge usually reads his papers before he comes to the court, and definitely there is a kind of a mind that the Supreme Court also made in the very beginning, that it is a direction that is a kind of a vague one, and hence it needs to be put into abeyance. Very clearly, there were some people who were actually opposing a kind of a stay on these guidelines, but the Supreme Court was very clear that these are vague, and every victim should be preserved. Every victim should have a mechanism. No victim should be left merciless, is what the intent of the topmost court of country was, and in fact it was clarified by the Chief Justice of India himself.
Right. As far as the other observations that came about from the Apex Court, Ananya, they did go about and speak about certain other states like Haryana for that matter. There were those examples that were also addressed by the Supreme Court. More on those observations as well, please.
Well, absolutely. Not only Haryana, but in fact, we were talking of the United States as well. I just told you that the Supreme Court made an observation that we want to become like the USA, where, white kids used to go to a different school. And that's exactly what India does not want to promote, because unity shall reflect in our institutions, is what the Chief Justice of India, Justice Suryakant, had to say while he was hearing this particular matter. So clearly, the intent of the Supreme Court was very, very clear that A, these guidelines are vague, B, that unity should be reflected in each and every institution that we have in our country. And in 75 years of independence, while we should be dreaming and while we should be creating a casteless society where caste is no bar, these directions can put us back to a regressive state itself.
Well, absolutely. A response now awaited from the central government as a notice has been issued by the Supreme Court to the union government regarding issuing and redrafting these guidelines. We have some more reactions that are coming in as far as this big development from the Apex Court is concerned. Let's take a look.
और 2012 के जो रूल्स हैं उनको दोबारा से लागू कर दिया है। कारण माना है जो हमारा लगातार आर्गुमेंट था सर्वोच्च न्यायालय के सामने के 3C, जिसके अंदर जातिगत भेदभाव की बात की गई थी, उसमें जनरल कास्ट को छोड़कर बाकी सभी कास्ट को उसमें इंक्लूड किया गया था। और कहीं ना कहीं ये दर्शाया जा रहा था कि जनरल कास्ट ही सिर्फ जो है वो टारगेट करती है और कास्ट को, उसको लेकर बहुत चिंता व्यक्त की है। और कहीं ना कहीं जो डिवाइड करने की बात, समानता की हमारा संविधान बात करता है, लेकिन ये रूल रेगुलेशन जो है वो कहीं ना कहीं विद्यार्थियों को डिवाइड करने का जो मामला है उसमें सामने आ रहा है। और ये CJI ने बिल्कुल साफ साफ माना कि रूल रेगुलेशन में कमी है और इसको सोचना और देखना पड़ेगा। इसी को लेकर उन्होंने ये कहा, एक सजेशन भी आया है कि एक कमेटी गठित की जाए और उस कमेटी के अंदर जो लीगल एमनी है, जो लोग एकेडमिक्स के हैं, कानूनी जानकार हैं, उन सबको रखा जाए और दोबारा से इसके बारे में फ्रेम करने के बारे में सोचा जाए। साथ साथ इसको स्टे कर दिया गया है। अब मार्च 2019 की जो है वो तारीख दी गई है।
कमेटी में सर कौन कौन लोग होंगे, इसके बारे में क्या टिप्पणी की गई है?
अभी जो सजेशन आया था उस सजेशन में लीगल एक्सपर्ट्स की बात की गई है, एकेडमिक्स की बात की गई है, सामाजिक जानकार जो है उनकी बात की गई है, पर अभी फॉर्मेशन को लेकर कोई साफ बात नहीं की गई है। लेकिन सजेशन आया तो आगे देखना होगा।
सर, CJI की तरफ से सख्त टिप्पणी की गई है। टिप्पणी इस बात को लिखी की गई कि जो हालात अमेरिका में है, गोरों और कालों के बीच में उनके लिए अलग व्यवस्था है, वो स्थिति यहाँ पर पैदा नहीं होगी कि आज़ादी के 75 साल के बाद भी हम इस स्थिति में।
बिल्कुल जस्टिस बागची की तरफ से ये बात आई थी और बिल्कुल उन्होंने बिल्कुल सही कहा जो हम लोगों ने बोला भी था कि भाई अगर इस तरीके के रूल रेगुलेशन जो कि 3C की हम बात करते हैं, अगर इस तरीके के रूल रेगुलेशन बनाए जाते हैं तो कहीं ना कहीं एक पर्टिकुलर कास्ट को टारगेट किया जाए है, जिसको जनरल कास्ट हम लोग कहते हैं। और उनको टारगेट करने का मतलब ये है कि कहीं ना कहीं आप बंटवारे की राजनीति कर रहे हैं। और 77 साल के बाद अगर इस तरीके के रूल रेगुलेशन बनाए जाएंगे हमारे देश में, वो कहीं ना कहीं जो हमारा संविधान कहता है एकजुट रहने की बात, उसको कहीं ना कहीं आप उससे अलग जा रहे हैं।
अगली सुनवाई सर कब होनी?
19 मार्च के लिए मामला जो है दोबारा से रखा गया।
केंद्र सरकार की तरफ से सर क्या दलीलें रखी गई सर?
आज केंद्र सरकार की तरफ से कुछ ज़्यादा नहीं कहा गया है। उन्होंने कहा है कि हमें समय चाहिए। अब समय जो है 19 मार्च की डेट है, उससे पहले उनको जवाब फाइल करने के लिए भी कहा गया।
तो आप यहाँ पर सुन सकते हैं।
So the new guidelines have been kept in abeyance. The old ones of 2012 are going to be back in the purview and we will have that implemented again. The language used is vague. This is what the Supreme Court has mentioned, and it has also in fact underlined that there is a need for experts to in fact weigh in and clarify on what really this is all about. Ananya continues to be with us on the broadcast. Ananya, about the setting up of an expert committee, anything that the court said about it?
Well, absolutely. At this particular point in time, the Supreme Court has not said anything, though it would be considering this particular option after, notices are received from different, stakeholders as far as, more importantly, the central government is concerned. And how would the central government be perceiving it as, Greha, is something that is very, very crucial to note, because at this particular point of time, since these directions are in abeyance, it's a big hit that comes into the central government. But clearly, the Supreme Court in 142 direction going in to stay these directions and saying that, the 2012 guidelines would continue is something that reflects upon the intent of the Supreme Court, the kind of mind that the Supreme Court had made that, these are guidelines that are completely not good in law. These are guidelines that do not promote equity, because equity and unity of the country is something that remains to be paramount. And that's exactly what Chief Justice of India, Justice Suryakant, had also gone on to say, that the unity of India should be reflected through its institution, more importantly schools and colleges, because these are the shaping grounds of students. These are the grounds where students grow up, they learn, and if at all there is no unity here, then how can we expect a casteless society or a future where the whole country is actually united?